Welcome, everyone. My name is Nivedita Pandey. You can call me Nivi. I'm a software technologist in the enterprise product team at Earthsoft. I will be co-presenting this office hour with Brian Bingham, who is our enterprise product team coordinator and software tester, and also my boss. So let's dive into it. The agenda for today is first we'll introduce enterprise permissions and see what the general rules are about role permissions, folder permissions, how permissions in general work. Then we'll do a bit of demonstration where we will play out a few scenarios which we often get from clients about permission related issues. And at the end, we'll open the floor for questions and answers. First is the overview of enterprise permissions. As most of you might know, only administrators can modify the permissions for users or roles. Permissions can be explicitly granted or denied, and permissions can be implicit, which can be inherited from a role. And lack of permissions is the same as deny, which means, let's say you don't have permissions to a specific facility, that would just mean that you don't have access to do anything in that facility. Permissions can be inherited from a role or folder. For example, you set permissions for a particular folder in the Explorer widget. You can inherit permissions from there as well, apart from the role. Effective permissions are the user's true permissions. So although you might have an explicit permission for a certain object type, your effective permission is what determines your actual permission. We will look at this in more detail during our demonstration. And one of the most important things to remember with enterprise permissions is a deny will always override a grant. So it does not matter if you have n number of grants on a certain object type or a specific file. If you have a deny anywhere, it will override the grant. And another point is explicit and inherited deny will also override a grant. Okay, furthermore, we have 4 different types of permissions. The first is owner permissions, which is inclusive of all permissions on objects as well as object types, except for creator, which is a special kind of permission we'll get to later. Editor permissions allows viewing and editing objects and object types. The object cannot be shared or deleted with editor permissions. Viewer permissions will only allow viewing the object or the object type. Users cannot edit, share, or delete the object. Creator permission is a special kind of permission, which is often typically used for the EDD object type to upload EDDs or download EDDs or generate user certificates for uploading EDDs. It is also used for reports object type to save new user reports. A couple other points on permissions would be permissions can be granted on widget types, but not on specific widgets, which means you can get editor on widget types, but you cannot get an editor exclusively for a certain type of widget. User reports, as we mentioned already, with the creator permissions can enable you to make new user reports. Apart from that, with the creator permission, creator permissions can only be granted on an object type, not on individual objects, which means that a creator on object type report allows you to create user reports from the base report. Okay, let's look at the different ways in which permissions can be assigned. So the first is roles. Roles are a simple way to assign a predefined set of permissions to multiple users. New roles can be created. Existing roles can be edited in the Role Manager widget, which is found on the administration dashboard in Enterprise. Only administrator users have access to this dashboard and this widget to edit different roles. The next is object permissions. Under object permissions, there are 2 different kinds of permissions. One is for individual objects, and the second is for object types. So the image above shows object permissions, and I have highlighted the action level exceedance Monitwell's benzene user report. So the user has editor permissions for this particular user report, which means object permissions. It's for this individual object. So the same can apply for a facility, a dashboard, a report, or a file, and many more objects. The image below demonstrates object type permissions, which are basically templates for objects. So permission on an object type sets permission on all current and future objects of that type. So here we can see that the user has editor and creator permissions for EDDs object type, facilities viewer permissions for the facilities object type, editor permissions for the reports object type. An example would be a grant viewer on facilities object types gives viewer on all current and future facilities. So if I were to create more facilities after assigning this permission here, the user automatically inherits that permission, the viewer permission for the facilities. The last is folder permissions. Folder permissions can be set on object types in the role profile or the user profile editor. So here you can see the groups and folder. This is the object type. And we can set permissions here depending on how much we want to allow the user. It can be implicit or explicit, so inherited from a role or explicitly granted. Another way to set folder permissions is through the Explorer widget in Enterprise. If you right-click on a particular file, on a particular folder, or on a particular file, and click on permissions, it will show you a permissions grid where you can assign individual permissions to that particular file or folder. Objects contained within a folder will inherit the permission set on the folder. So if you have an image inside a folder, and it will inherit the permissions that have been assigned to the folder. And any other objects that you add in that folder will also inherit the folder permissions. Okay, so now we will play out a couple scenarios. Brian will be playing the part of a project manager who has some questions regarding EQuIS enterprise permissions. And we will be looking at 3 different scenarios, which we often see from where clients have questions regarding permissions. So Brian?
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Nivi. Thanks for meeting with me today, because I've got some problems. I'm the project manager for a project we have a facility called Metal Plating Facility, and we've got a number of things going on with it, but I'm trying to get some EDDs uploaded, and I have some team members who are supposed to be doing that. They're having trouble. I'll get to that later, because they're not able to even get to the point where they can upload an EDD. So I asked my admin to set me up with an EDD role, because I want to be able to get a few EDDs in so we can get the ball rolling on this project. And every time I try to upload an EDD, I'm getting an error. They're rejecting my EDDs, and I don't know what's going on. I thought my admin had me set up. I checked my permissions in my profile, and it shows me as being a member of the data submitter role. And so that's what I know. Where do we go from here?
Okay, let's look at it. I have your enterprise site up and running here, and I will impersonate your user if that's okay with you, and we can look at your permissions.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to impersonate your user, and I have another window open as administrator user. So if I need to modify any permissions for you, then we can do it there without having to sign out and sign back in.
Okay.
So you're saying the facility is metal plating facilities, and I see that your EDDs are not being processed completely.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the EDD. Those are some of the EDDs that I've been submitting. That last one, I know I did a few days ago, and it was rejected.
Okay. I'm going to look at your permissions. Since workflow is green, that should not be an issue. So I'm almost certain this is a permissions issue. And it looks like your user has only viewer permissions on the EDD object type. I'm going to go through the administration dashboard, and since my user has admin permissions,
Oh, can
I'm
you
going to look.
go back to my permissions? So I've got I've got editor on facilities, so I should be able to and I've got creator on files. So why can't I upload this?
But to upload EDDs to that facility, you need editor on that facility, and you need creator on the EDDs object type to be able to upload new EDDs to that facility.
Okay. Well.
And I'm going to just go and check here where the permission is inherited, and it says that the data submitter lab role is giving you the viewer permission. That needs to be changed to creator permissions. So you will need to have your admin change your role to the editor creator permission for EDDs, and you should be able to upload EDDs without issues.
So my admin is out on holiday for 2 weeks. I'm giving you approval. Can you change that now? I mean, fix that role.
I will go to the data submitter lab role, and I'm going to take out viewer and give you creator on EDDs.
All right.
And now you should be able to upload EDDs. Just a quick note that if you see the EDD upload widget, it will say that you need to have EDD creator permissions to download, upload, or view a file.
Okay.
Sorry, not view, to download or upload a file.
Right. So now I should be good to go? I mean,
yes, you should now be able to upload EDDs to the metal plating facility, and I'm almost certain. I'm certain it won't be rejected.
All right. Cool. Great.
Okay. What's the next issue you're seeing?
Well, the other one was the person who's supposed to be loading the EDDs. I'm not even supposed to be having to do this, but the person who's supposed to be loading EDDs, we can't even get him his user certificate. We've given him permission for EDDs, but we changed his password, and which is what I thought my admin told me that we have to do. First we had him change his password, and we thought that would generate the certificate so that he can put that in with his data files and upload. But then he wasn't getting it, and then I had the admin change the password, and it's still not doing it. We've done it multiple times, and I don't know if there's something wrong with Enterprise or why he's not getting this user cert, because he can't do anything without it, right? He can't even rejecting his EDD if he doesn't have that cert.
Okay, so you have a user that when he changes his password, or if the administrator changes his password, he's not getting a user certificate. It's not just generated in the first place.
Right, he never gets it. Yeah.
Okay, what is the name of the user? And I can look at it here.
His name is Yannick Stefanis.
Okay, let's look at his permissions. So I see that he's part of the professional read-write role and the user role in Enterprise, and he has editor on facilities. And okay, so the problem comes back to EDD creator permissions, which he is inheriting from the user role. So even to generate a user certificate, the user needs to have EDD creator permissions, creator permissions on the EDD object type to be able to generate the user certificate. So do I have your permission to change the user role?
Yeah, fix that.
So with viewer, you would not be able to generate a user certificate, even as an administrator user. For a user that does not have creator permissions on EDD object type, you would not be able to generate a user certificate. So I'm going to just assign creator and save. And I think you should be able to generate a user certificate now.
Cool. I'll have him, and I have to have him change his password, right? To
Yes,
have,
yes. We'll have to change the password, or the administrator user will have to change his password, and then he should get a new user certificate.
all right. Well, that clears up those two issues. So while I have you on here, can we do one more thing? Because
Sure.
I don't know if it's permissions related or if it's something went wrong with uploading this file, but I've got a presentation coming up, and there's this extremely important file that I need that is going to be a key part of my presentation. And I thought it got uploaded. I wanted it, it was going to be part of this project, and I had one of my people upload it. And I've looked all over in that Explorer widget, and I cannot find this file.
Okay.
Can you check and see if it's there, or I don't understand why I can't see it.
All right. Let's see. With your user, can you tell me the name of the file, and I can check it?
File, yeah, the file's called Unicorn.
Is that UNICORN?
Yes.
Okay. So for your, when I'm impersonating you,
yeah, that's exactly what happens for me. I search for it and it doesn't show up.
Okay.
And it should be in my North America folder. It's like I thought that's where they put it, but.
All right. But I don't see it in the North America folder. I'm going to search the same thing with administrator permissions, and let's see what we have.
Okay.
So Unicorn, and the file is here. You said it's under the North America folder?
Well, that's where, yeah, that's in that project.
I see. So I'm seeing a difference where if I'm impersonating your user, I don't see the images folder here. Let me switch to your user. You do not see the images folder. So this is definitely a permissions issue for this particular folder. This is the file you were looking at. So I'm going to check the permissions.
Well, hold on though. I know I've got, I thought they gave me everything. I should have permission to, all those folders that my admin gave me permission to every folder, like the object type group folder.
I see you have an explicit owner permission on this folder, but I can't see your effective permissions, which are your true permissions. So I'm going to click here and see what your true permissions are. And it looks like, although you're inheriting owner permissions from the project manager role, which is what you mentioned for groups and folders object type, and you have explicit owner permissions, you are inheriting deny permissions from the lab submitter, data submitter lab role, deny viewer permission, which will override.
Doesn't two owners give me more permission to overpower?
You can have multiple owner permissions, but one deny will override any number of owner permissions you have. And even if I go back and I see the Unicorn file, and I see the permissions for this file for your user.
Yeah, they gave me owner on that file. I remember the admin said it was.
You do have owner, but you're assigned to a role, the data submitter lab role, which is making you inherit a deny permission for this folder. I would need to, can I modify your permissions and then we can see if it fixes it?
Yeah, no, I need that file. I've got to have it today.
Okay, so I'm going to take deny off from here, from the data submitter lab. I'll just give you an explicit owner. And I'm going to save this. And let's see how that changes the file permission. So now your effective permission is owner, which wasn't there earlier. So now you should be able to see this file. And let's confirm that
check that for me, like go in there and.
I will refresh the folder and let me check it again. There you go. And You
Can you check?
can,
Yeah, well, oh, yeah, you didn't have to open that up.
I'm sorry. Um, but you have your important file right here.
Yes, thank you. The success for my presentation hinges upon having that file.
Yes. And you have folder, now the images folder shows up, which has these two files.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that clears everything up for now. Thank you, Nidhi.
Thanks, Brian. Is there anything else?
No, nothing at this time.
Great. So we have three scenarios, which we just played out. The first one was the project manager is unable to load EDDs because of lack of EDD creator object type EDD creator permissions. The second scenario was the generation of user certificate, which was also related to the lack of creator permissions on the EDD object type. And the third scenario was folder permissions in enterprise for a file and for a file permissions as well as folder permissions. I hope that cleared some questions about enterprise. And we have more documentation on enterprise permissions, and please feel free to review the documentation. Our next office hour will be on November 16th on design, publish, and share report definition language reports in EQuIS. It's an intermediate skill office hour. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and for attending the office hour. If you have any questions, Brian and I will be happy to answer them at this point.
Carl actually asked a great question. He said, if I impersonate a user to test permissions, does that count as a login for that impersonated user? And then he says, for clients who provide access to third parties via VLA, does that count as a login and thus have potential to incur a VLA fee even though the true user never logged in? And Brian and Nivi, I can let you guys confirm this, but I actually just looked this up while you guys were wrapping up here, and it looks like it looks like if a VLA user is impersonated using that impersonate feature that Nivi was showing, that it does count. The login usage would show up on the VLA usage report and would be chargeable. So for those VLA clients, Carl, you'd want to basically like do a screen share with them or something instead to make, to troubleshoot so that you're not necessarily doing that. Brian, is that correct? I found that in the documentation, but I wanted to confirm.
Yep, that's correct. I mean, it's a true impersonation. So, I mean, it is logging you in as that user, so it will consume that. If that's something that's happening all the time, I'm sure that's something that we can talk to sales or something about. If I don't think we need to be
on how to deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question, Carl. Oh, here we go. So here's a question from Peter. Peter asks, why do some modules, for example, DQM, require the user to have admin permissions? This is difficult. So meaning admin permissions along with their ALS permissions and professional. And this is difficult. This is a difficult approach to work with because it enables any entry-level chemist or engineer the ability to alter other people's permissions when they only need access to run DQM. Can't admin permissions be left out of these requirements? So that's on, I think, the application level security side. But Brian or Nivi, do you guys have any comments about that?
No, I'm not familiar with what DQM or, that's kind of outside of our product team. So
Sure.
We can certainly look into that because sounds, like it would have maybe something that we need to address, but I'm not, I just don't have, I'm not familiar enough with DQM and what you need to get to effectively use DQM, the permissions that are required for that to get
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. Yeah, Peter, I know exactly what you're talking about with being able to use DQM within EQuIS Professional. And if you're using application level security, then it does actually make you be an admin as well. And we'll follow up with the professional product team about that to see kind of what the deal is there and get you some more information. Good question. And then Kelly asks, let's see, Nivi changed permissions on the roles to address some user issues rather than reassigning the user to a different role. Her usage seems like it would not be a best practice. Is that correct? And I have my own opinions about that, but Nivi and Brian, I'll let you comment.
You know, there is, and that's a good point. You probably would, you know, one way of doing it would be to, you know, we saw we had a lab submitter, or excuse me, data submitter lab role. And in that case, that role was lacking. It wasn't set up correctly, and it didn't have the creator permission on it. And that's why Nivi added that on, because it needed it. I mean, even for, that role was intended for individuals to be able to upload EDDs to the system, and the way it was designed was incorrect, and it wasn't able to do that. So that's why she changed that lab role directly. You do have a good point, though. Let's say you had a lab role and another data submitter role, and maybe they have different facility permissions. You know, that would be a case where you would want to assign the correct role, you know, the user to the correct role in accordance to what, you know, which facility you want them to upload data to. But I think in this scenario, that was correct. The way Nivi did it was to fix that role rather than assign me to a different role. Because really what we need to do was, I just needed to be able to upload EDDs. And I already had the permissions to the facility. It's just I didn't have that creator permission.
Yeah. So Brian, I mean, really, it probably depends on if Nivi needs to, you know, if she needed to correct that for just your user, then she might have just changed that for your individual user. But if it's really an issue that's going to be for essentially any user in that role, then she would ultimately want to change it for the entire role. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So probably Kelly probably depends on the actual situation and whether it makes sense to change it for a role or just for an individual. Yeah, good question.
And then maybe Kelly was talking about too about that scenario with the folder permissions, where that role was denied the permission to the folder.
The folder.
Yeah, because that I could see where that one there was a reason why, you know, that lab submitter role wasn't supposed to see that stuff, because that's not their job, right? They're just there to submit data. They don't need to see that folder. So
they don't need that unicorn.
Yeah, that unicorn file does not. I don't want it falling into the wrong hands. So I mean, that's my use only, for my eyes only. So lab submitters do not need the unicorn file. So that is a good point. I think maybe change the permission on the role, whereas we could have, you know, removed me from the lab submitter role and assigned a different permission if we wanted to preserve that. If we didn't care, if it was, you know, by mistake that role was denied that, if we reviewed it, then, you know, you could, that's fine to change the permission on the role. It's kind of on a case-by-case basis, you know, how you want to address those type of things.
Perfect. Excellent. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thanks, Nivi and Brian. Great session. And we hope to see everybody at our next office hour.
Thanks, Emily.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.